Welcome everybody to Destination Unknown. I can't believe it. Episode number 18. I am still in Colorado. I am in Englewood, Colorado, talking to Carol Mobley today. Carol Mobley is an ephemera dealer. She does shows all year round, and she's going to deep dive with us on the ephemera marketplace and what it looks like in 2024 going into 2025. So Carol, welcome into Destination Unknown.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what the marketplace nowadays looks like, and then we're going to rewind and get you into how you started and ventured into this journey.
You know, here in Denver, it's a strong market for ephemera and postcards. We've got a good collecting market here. Avid book readers, people interested in history. So it's a good market. And I can't complain one iota about it. It's fabulous. And there's always something to buy somewhere. And that's half the battle, is just buying stuff.
So how are you sourcing nowadays? Are you flea markets? Are you waiting for phone calls to come in? Are you advertising?
You know, I don't advertise, but I do have a website where I promote my show, and I get people who will contact me about, my family doesn't want this anymore, or I've got cancer and I've got to empty everything out before it gets thrown out, or people contact me all the time. But I also, I travel, and when I'm out traveling, how can you not stop and shop?
Right. And are you going to antique malls? Where are you going when you're looking for what you're looking for?
I'm a pretty picky buyer, so I'll stop at antique malls and small mom and pop shops. If I drive somewhere, I never drive on the interstate. I'd much rather drive the back roads and get the local flair and so that's where I'll stop. The car, I think, is on autopilot. It just automatically pulls into the antique store. It sees a sign and
it just finds its way wherever the rust in the paper is. It finds its way there for you.
Exactly. The more it's buried, the better it is.
Yeah.
Usually.
And do you have any exciting pickups you've had in recent history? Anything that you'd love to share with us?
Oh, I just got a really, really interesting piece. It's small. It's only 2 inches, maybe by 3 inches, and it's in a case, but it's a painting on cobwebs.
A paint. Was this done by Charlotte's Web?
No, this is actually a well-known artist from Innsbruck, Austria.
Okay.
And it's a portrait of some guy in a military outfit. And back in the late 1800s, it was a thing that they had the special kind of spider that did a real tight web, and the spider would do the web, and they'd harvest the web and clean it, and then they'd use the web as the canvas for the painting.
What about the fragility of it, though?
Well, you think about spider webs, and they're strong. It's some of the strongest material for the size. And they'd paint on it, and it was almost like a translucent thing. So in this little case, on one side is a little paper fold that you can open up, and there's this actual spider and some of his web smashed in there for prosperity, I guess. And then the other side is covered with paper as well. And you open it, and it's this guy's portrait. It's beautiful.
And because you know the artist, what date can you put on that? How old is that item?
It probably 1890 is what I'm guessing.
And it survived this long.
Some of the web is starting to deteriorate, but the painting where it's painted on the web is fine, and the bottom part of it is fine as well. But it's just incredible. It's a lost art, cobweb painting.
Yeah, it may be so lost when people watch this, they may go, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, and I know the Metropolitan Art Museum in New York has a collection of them, and there was one other place I found online that had a collection of them. But you don't see it very often. But there are a few people experimenting with it again nowadays, and they're more commonly using caterpillar, silks and that kind of stuff to paint on instead of just spider.
This conversation may restart a trend. You don't know. It may restart a trend. We're going to see what
Well,
happens.
hopefully somebody will say, "Hey, I got to try that." What is that all
Hey,
about?
there's a spider web in my house. Let me make a portrait. So interesting. I didn't expect that at all. So
Yeah, there you go.
tell me about your business nowadays. I know that you do shows. I know that
Mhm.
you have everything centralized in your website. If you don't mind giving that website out, but tell me about the day-to-day business for you as a dealer.
What so here's the thing, as a dealer, I don't really have a lot of day-to-day business because I don't sell on eBay and I don't do some of the marketplace stuff. I run two postcard and paper shows, and so I
Okay.
sell at those. And then I also run the Rocky Mountain Book and Paper Fair, and I'll sell at that one.
Hmm.
And I'm and since my husband recently passed away, I'm going to expand my travels and sell at a few other shows too. So I'm going to go to Buffalo next weekend. There's a rare book fair in Buffalo, and I'm going to display stuff and sell stuff there. So I'm just kind of jumping into the market after having been here at the house for 10 years, kind of being the primary caregiver. But now I get to spread my wings and experiment.
And,
But
and and go buy more and go sell more. Of course, of course.
it's all about the thrill of the hunt.
It is. Yeah. Even in the book world, the hunt is everything for me.
I keep telling myself I'm not a book dealer. I'm an ephemera dealer. But dang, I keep buying books.
Well, sometimes when we open up those books, we find the ephemera.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So, speaking of finding ephemera in a book, I bought a Bible from a local estate here about 2 years ago, and I've had it. I've held on to it since, and it's a large format Bible from, I think it was printed in 1825 in Vermont.
Okay.
But the Bible was unused by the family. I know who the family is. They had to put a, a, an unused check with a
Sure.
note on the back inside the Bible. But in the very last page, insert the page of the Bible, someone had used a quill pen, and in probably in the late 1820s or 1830 had handwritten a note in there that the congregation of Reverend Pastor Mather, had been kidnapped by the British and taken to Long Island, where they kept them for several months before they returned the parishioners. But Reverend Mather wasn't returned to Connecticut until October of that year. And if you look it up in history, sure enough, there's this incident where the British kidnapped, and so
And
this
was this
book
was
documents it.
was this written in the Bible or on a note in the Bible?
It was written in the Bible, but then there's a
Ooh,
separate note
yeah.
that tells more about the family and who it was that made the note.
And in your mind and your knowledge and your experience, who is a prospective buyer for that type of item because of the historical significance?
Well, I would hope that the town of Darien, Connecticut would be interested in it because that's where this
Right.
kidnapping occurred. But it could be a family member whose family had been kidnapped in that group, or some other historical museum that likes to document early American history.
Now,
So it could be several
would
things.
yeah, would you contact the Darien Historical Society and let them know you have this piece?
I did, but
Oh,
I haven't heard back from them. And I think that's a shortfall. This has happened several times with this, where
yeah.
you contact someone via their website, and
Hmm.
whoever's in charge may not necessarily check
Yeah.
messages on a regular basis, or they don't know who to forward a message to, and
Right.
so it gets lost in the shuffle. So
Right.
I kind of think it was a couple weeks ago when I
Right.
contacted them. and
Yeah. And sometimes these historical societies are run by one or two people only, and you
and
know,
if it's not something that's up
yeah,
their ballywick, yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's how it happens. So
But
how
I'll
did you?
have it
Yeah.
with me in Buffalo, so if anybody wants to
Oh,
see
if
it,
we
come
have
and
any
look.
buyers out there, go see Carol in Buffalo. So how did you get started? When did you get started in this journey?
In 1996, my husband moved here from upstate New York. He um, was one of the founders of the Ephemera Society of America.
Okay.
So he had a vast knowledge of ephemera. That was his thing. And I always liked antiques, but when he moved in, he started showing me paper, and I was hooked. I loved it because I love history. Everything you pick up has a story. You just have to unveil the story. It's so fascinating. I
So
love it.
prior to 1996, you were not doing this as a
No,
hobby.
no,
So your husband marriage got you into this.
exactly. Yeah.
And was he a dealer himself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He did primarily advertising trade cards, but he did letterheads and broadhead sheets and, you know, early stuff. I told him when he moved here that he was being a paper snob because he didn't want anything unless it was older than 1900 or newer than
Okay.
or older than
Yeah.
1900. And I said, if you stay in Colorado and you have that attitude, you'll go out of business because Colorado's not as old as the East Coast, and we don't have that deep
Right.
history.
Right. Yeah. You don't
So
have a seaport coming in with all that history coming in all those
right.
years. Yeah.
So we kind of expanded. We went to an auction and there was a batch of postcards. And I said, oh, let's buy those. And we did. So then we started doing postcards. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm pretty heavy into postcards. I've got a large inventory of postcards. Um, and and he just kept doing other things. We trade catalogs and travel brochures and railroadiana and brewiana. And it just kept
Yeah. Yeah.
expanding. And now I've got a garage full.
Okay. Well, here's the question of the day then. Is everything listed and for sale on the website?
No, there's nothing on the website. The website is just for show information. I just don't have the patience to sit down and catalog an item, and it just takes too much time. That's why I don't mess with eBay. And of course, I've been working. I only just retired a year ago, and it was impossible to do stuff like that when I was working anyway.
Right.
So I just haven't expanded into that yet,
And
and I don't know if I will.
right. So you have a garage full, hopefully a little bit organized. I'm definitely coming to Colorado now to visit you.
It's organized. That's what's
Yeah,
nice. I do
right.
have it
So if
organized.
somebody asked you if you have such and such, you'd be able to sort of go to the area and
Oh yeah. I
yeah.
I know my inventory pretty
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Is there a specific category within this or a subject matter that is your absolute favorite? That's the thing you love to talk about, hunt for,
Oh,
or is it so vast? It's as long as it's paper, it's good.
as long as it's paper, it's good. But we do have things that we've collected over the years,
Mm-hmm.
and that I particularly like. Cyanotype postcards and photographs. We've got a large collection of those, and we've got identified and unidentified ones. But my favorite are the ones that are identified. Like
Because
where it was
because why?
from.
What makes that so special?
Um, because then you know more about the history. If
Okay.
it's just some unidentified picture of a person sitting on a front porch, you don't know
Right.
anything about it, and it's hard to determine anything about it at
Yeah,
that point. But at
geography,
least if it was a
location.
postcard and it was mailed from Timbuktu,
Mhm,
at least you'd know, I can start here. That's where it was mailed from,
mhm.
and it gives you some more. And there's always interesting messages on the back of cards. I really like messages too. There's some fun stuff people write, and you'd think, oh my God, they wrote that where everybody can read it.
Well, I mean, there are people who, you sometimes you find shoe boxes full of letters. I mean,
Yeah.
and you happen upon a magnificent collection of a correspondence between two people, man and woman, or brothers separated by ocean or something.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
that's a very historical and beautiful collection to gather and to curate.
Yeah. And I like postal history. I have to say, early post, it doesn't even have to be a collection of letters back and forth. If it's a cancellation from a dead post office or from a railroad post office, or just some early stamp use on a letter, just beautiful handwriting on a letter, artwork drawn on a letter, on a cover. I think that's probably, I really like that.
So do you consider yourself more of a historian?
Yeah, I think I do, because history, I love history. I
Mhm.
just, it just fascinates me. Everything you pick up just has a
Right,
story to tell.
right. But what you do though is more like building a puzzle. I mean, you have to piece things together and understand, where did this postcard come from? I understand its provenance.
Well, and some pieces I don't do that with. There's some things that you have that are common that you just kind of think, oh, great, that'll be fun to have in stock. And,
Mhm.
and that's okay. But every now and then you'll get a piece that you have to just do some research on. Like I picked up a letter recently, and well, it was an interesting cover early from Norway, Maine to Denver, Colorado,
Okay.
and and there was a letter inside. So I opened it up, started reading the letter, and this guy was talking about his trip from Norway to Denver, and he, he was talking about reading somebody else's writing, and they were talking about how they'd gone through Wyoming and they went through this part and that part, but he said they were really telling a tall tale because the road doesn't go those ways. But he did mention the fact that there were a lot of graves along the way where the Indians had destroyed
Mhm.
homes and the people were just buried. I mean, it was just an interesting letter. It was dated probably 1873 or 68 or something.
Multiple pages or one letter front and back?
Uh, 4 pages.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really, and we had another interesting letter. You just, that's why I like to get contents in the envelope, because people who collect covers take the insides out. They don't care about them, but people do. And we had received a letter that we bought from some guy years ago, and we have since placed it with a museum. But it was about a fort that had just been started up in Montana, and the cook was writing this letter, and the commander of the fort was looking for volunteers to go into Canada after the guy who killed Custer in the battle. What's it, whatever, I mean, the famous Indian that um, from the Battle of Little Bighorn.
Right.
And they wanted volunteers to go to Canada to bring him back for justice. Nobody volunteered because they were all afraid that they wouldn't come
Mhm.
back alive. So, and it was just a really interesting historical letter about going after this guy in Canada and trying to bring him back. And the beginning of this fort in Montana, and it was really an interesting
And
letter.
so that got bought by a museum, you said?
It was placed in a museum,
Placed
yeah.
in a museum. Okay, so let's sort of pinpoint on that for a second, because I think my viewers will be interested in that. Because we do have a lot of ephemera dealers who watch the show and are very curious about the process of contacting university libraries or museums. What is the take us through the process, A to Z on how that happens?
Well, this was kind of an unusual situation because we actually sold it to a man who donated it to the museum. And my finding is that unless you know someone in an institution or have been to a show where you can shake somebody's hand
Right.
and introduce yourself, you just don't have a foot in. You've got to get that foot in the door first. And um and it's frustrating, and it is taxing. It takes
Right.
some time.
Yeah, you probably fall down more than you make that connection. I
I
remember
think so.
we had done a destination unknown earlier, and we had interviewed a lady from Oakland, California, Kate Mistas, and she had said that developing the relationships with the university librarians, that was the toughest thing to do, is to develop that
Mhm,
relationship and build that trust. Um,
mhm.
and that takes quite some time.
Yeah, I agree. So it's not a, oh, I got something, I think
Right,
they'll want it kind of thing. You can't
right.
that won't work.
Yeah, I think though that when you possess something like that, there's always that excitement of, oh, I know where I could get this to. I know where it
Yeah.
should go, and it isn't that easy. The walls start forming, and the
Hmm.
emails sometimes don't come back with a reply. So I understand it's very difficult.
And the thing about ephemera is that there's a lot of common stuff, but the really good stuff, the really important stuff, which is more valuable, it's a shame to say, is being forged and copied and manipulated in such a way that it's really hard for people to trust what they're getting
Mhm.
for their money unless they can put their hand on it, see it, touch it, investigate it themselves. And I think some of this university mistrust, it might just be because they've been burned too many
Right.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I haven't heard this before. So there is a forgery in this sort of epistolary and letter writing. People are finding old paper and quill pens, and they're developing the penmanship to do this.
Absolutely, and stamps. Some
Okay.
stamps that are valuable are forged, and that's really common. And there's
Mhm.
several books published about famous stamp forgeries,
Right.
and even the forgeries now are getting to be worth money because there were certain forgers that are now collected. So
Yeah, yeah. There's a niche market inside of that. Yes, sure.
yeah,
And
yeah.
wow, it's amazing. So I'm going to rewind again. So 1996, you develop a love for this. Um,
Mhm.
how deep and how quickly do you get into it? I mean, your husband's already into it,
Right.
but you're broadening his peripheral vision on because I think you're falling in love with it in a deeper sense. So how quick does that happen where you start, it's occupying all of your thoughts and you're hunting for this stuff, and how were you hunting for it pre-2000 as opposed to how you hunt for it now? Because I think that because the times have changed, I think our sourcing has changed.
Uh-huh. And it has. It's getting harder to find
Mhm.
fresh material. Um, but uh, the first part of your question about how long did it take, you know, I kind of started in it slow because Bill was around. He was still active in the industry and it was his business. So I just kind of rode on his coattails for a long time. But finally by 1999, I was confident enough to start doing some things on my own. And
Mhm.
I'd buy, mostly postcards. I left the ephemera up to him, but by 2010, I was buying ephemera and covers and letters and artwork and just about anything else. I use him as a sounding board and get his opinion about certain things. But yeah, by that time I was 15 years. It took
Mhm.
a while to learn a lot about it, and there's still stuff I don't know. There's still things about every industry that you just
Right.
don't know until you've seen it or learn it.
But
There's so much to know.
right, but and how has sourcing changed in the past quarter of a century? I know for books, sourcing has changed a lot. I was buying back in the 90s as well, and the way I buy now is a lot different than how it was back then.
Yeah. When Bill first moved here, we went to a lot of estate sales, and there was actually in-person auctions, which,
Yeah. Oh,
at like a farm auction, almost a good
yeah.
old fashioned farm auction,
Th-
nothing
Those
like
those are
it.
dwindling by the day. They're dwindling
I
by the day.
love them.
Yeah.
I just was at one,
Mhm.
3 weeks ago. But you're right; they're disappearing, and the opportunity to buy in that kind of a setting or that kind of a venue is just disappearing. So a lot of times now we'll wait for an estate to call, or we'll find a shop where there's something to buy, or we'll put the feelers out to people that we know that, we're looking for this. It's just not the same. It's getting harder to find fresh material.
Are you doing flea markets at all?
No,
No.
no. My finding is that at flea markets you just don't find. it's just the junk stuff. And I at one time I would probably buy anything on paper, but now I'm a little bit more discerning just because I already have a garage full of all kinds of paper. I'm just
Right.
trying to be a little more discerning.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the flea markets down here, which I still frequent, oftentimes because it's a very transient culture down here in South Florida.
Mhm.
You know, people who rent or people that own homes and they move. I mean, we often find boxes of just paper at the flea markets. You know,
Mhm.
nobody has the patience to sift through it all and try to find that paper gold in there. So you can oftentimes you can just buy a box of papers if you don't mind and you have the patience and the time to sift through it. But
Yeah.
they'll sell them to you for $10, $20 just for a box of random household papers.
Yeah. And I have we tell people all the time, don't throw anything away until you have somebody look at it because you just don't know
Right.
what it might be worth or if there is anything. And I
Hmm.
think my message is finally getting through to people here in Denver because I do have people call and say,
Right.
we found this. Is it but you'd be surprised how much ends up in the landfill
Right.
and important stuff.
Yeah. Do they come to you or do you actually go to the estate when they call you and you're going to go look personally?
Both.
Okay.
I've had both, and
Yeah.
I offer to go. There are some people who just simply can't drive anymore,
Right.
so I'll go to them, or
Right.
they're a little bit further away and they don't want to have to drive all the way to Denver, so I'll
Right.
make the trip,
Yeah. Never a bad thing to go to someone's estate because you can also see the paintings on the wall, the books in the bookshelves, and you get a better idea, a more lucid idea of what could be there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see what people have and how they lived, and I like that part of it
You're
too.
not a historian anymore. Now you're a sociologist. The
It
way we
all
live.
fits together.
It's a great liberal arts education is what it is. It's awesome. So how often are you doing book show? I know you do a lot of book shows. I know you run some. Tell me about that world right now.
Well, let's see. I run the Rocky Mountain Book and Paper Fair. It's a 1 year event, an annual event every year,
Mhm.
and it's in August here in Castle Rock, just south of Denver, 20 minutes south of Denver. We it's at the county fairgrounds in Castle Rock. It's an excellent venue. Oh my gosh, it's so good. And this year, we had to build back up from COVID. It's been kind of a slog, but this last year we had 50 antiquarian dealers
Okay.
and we opened up the conference room to authors and we had 16 authors. So we had 66 different exhibitors at the event and it was really a good, well attended. It was really fun. And I
Is that how large it was pre-COVID, or what was it significantly larger than that?
you know the biggest turnout, the biggest number of exhibitors we ever had was I think about 85, and it
Okay.
was in a different venue. We used to have the Denver Merchandise Mart up here, and it was a pretty good sized building. And right before COVID, they went belly up, and the bank repossessed it, and somebody bought it and tore it all down. So we were hit by having to find a new venue, and then COVID, and
Hmm.
so it's just been a build it back up. People aren't used to not or to traveling 20 minutes south of Denver to go to a book fair, but they're
Right.
getting the idea that it's not that far and it's still a lot of fun and people come from all over.
Are you finding that there is a younger generation, surprisingly enough, coming to the fairs? Because that's what
Yes.
Kate had mentioned how shocked she was now with the younger generation who've been raised on the technology of the cell phone and the computer, that this is the first time they've ever seen sort of handwritten or even a typewriter that so many degrees of technology they were unfamiliar with, and she had mentioned that so many, she was impressed by the younger generations coming in and buying and collecting.
Yeah. Yeah. There was there's a period of time in society that I recognize as the minimalist generation. They didn't want anything. They didn't want anything from their parents' estates. They lived with the very bare minimum of stuff.
Mhm.
But I think we've survived that generation because there is a new generation of people coming in who are interested in history and
Right.
want to help preserve things, and they want to collect certain things. So I think we've probably got a couple more years to get way beyond the minimalist and have this other generation come in. But yeah, we've survived
Yeah,
that.
I think that once we got to the point in time where technology gave us the paper shredders to plug into our living room outlets, I think we've shredded a lot of great things in the past 20 years or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think part of that has happened, as simple as that sounds. I just think that,
But
you make a great point.
yeah, but and as a book dealer, reading a book is not just about reading the book. It's a
Right.
tactile experience. It's the smell of the ink. It's the feel of the paper. It's the joy in turning
Yeah.
to the next page and getting it.
Yeah.
So it all has to do with touch and smell and seeing.
Yeah.
It's sensory. It's not just
Yeah, there's
reading.
also an emotion, there's also an emotion and a power when you know you're holding a special book.
Mhm.
When you
Same
hold
thing
that,
applies with ephemera.
yeah, you
Yeah.
just know there's something that's transmitted metaphysically between that piece of physical paper and our human hands, that there's just there's a feeling and emotion there.
Right. You pick up a letter that was signed by a president.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about a auto pen signature. I'm talking
Right.
about an actual signature. And you pick it up and you hold it and you read it and you think this was actually touched by
Right. Yeah.
FDR or whoever the president was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a copy of a limited edition that when John F. Kennedy was a senator, he had written a book, and I have a copy of that signed by him. And every time I show someone this book, there is definitely that feeling of,
Yeah.
that this former president who was subsequently assassinated had once not only signed this book, but he had given this book as a gift to somebody. And
Hmm.
yeah, the history is utterly amazing sometimes.
Yeah. It does. Sometimes it just puts you in a state of awe. Just wonder how, or like the cobweb painting. How did they ever figure out to do that? And how it's so detailed. It's just wonderful. You look at
Where is
something
it
and
now? Is it near you to show us, or not near you?
it's in the kitchen.
Oh, okay.
I, I could go get it if you want to wait, but
Maybe at the very end you can show it. I think that'd be cool. Maybe at the very end.
okay. All
That's
right.
so interesting. So, one thing you said that's a little sad to me is that it's getting harder and harder to find these great, I don't even want to say collections, but great items.
Hmm.
Where do you see this in another quarter of a century? I mean, does it become so rare that everything becomes rare in that world, or items that are not so rare become rare because it's disappearing?
No, I think there's always going to be the rare items.
Hmm.
Um, but as more institutions end up buying those rare items, those are never going to be put back in circulation. They're in an institution and that's where they're going to remain. But there's always a collector, and collectors, when they move on, their families put them back up on the market. And I think that's the trend where we're seeing where we're getting more of our stuff is from
Right.
an estate or it's not just a raw, go to somebody's attic and pull out all this stuff that's really
Right.
rare. It's coming now from an estate situation. And I think that's going to be the trend.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Does it often have to be a lot of things by one person, or could it be just one piece of paper that carries some weight of historical significance? Or are you always looking to piece things together into a bigger picture?
No, I'll find one thing and and be satisfied with that.
Can
Obviously, if,
you give an example of that?
well, like the letter from the guy that
Right.
traveled from Maine to Denver, that was just the one letter, and there was
Yeah.
nothing else with it. So,
Right.
that's all I have
Right.
is that.
But I'm sure you're able to find history on maybe the gentleman who wrote the letter.
I probably could.
Yeah.
I have not researched that one yet.
Right.
Because I just recently picked it up. But yeah, you can find things about things that go with items.
It's like an
But
endless rabbit hole you can just go into. I mean,
you can, and
yeah.
I have, but I've learned that unless I really want to spend a lot of research time on something, I've learned to identify what's kind of the more common stuff that I don't want to spend that much time on, and then I'll just price them and move them on. But every now and then you find a treasure that you want to just really dig into.
Right. Now, do you have just the ultimate great story of a find that you could share with the audience? Maybe the greatest find you and your husband, or maybe just you discovered, and give us the story about that.
Okay, well, this isn't really a find story, but it is an interesting story
Okay.
nonetheless. This was early on in our relationship when he moved to Colorado. So maybe 1999 or 2000, 25 years ago or so. We'd gotten a call from a family who had a George Washington signed letter, but they needed to have it authenticated.
Okay.
And so we agreed to meet them. We traveled from Denver to Albuquerque to meet them. Um, and they traveled from somewhere else to there. We kind of met somewhere in the
Okay.
middle somewhere. And then when we met them, they pulled out this framed letter. And somebody had taken the time to frame it, but it was framed in the early 60s. And somebody had bought a 5 and dime frame with the cardboard back, and it was just a cheap frame with acid cardboard. So here's this rare letter, really interesting historical content, but in order to authenticate it, we needed to take it out of the frame. So they took it out of the frame and handed us the paper, which is great. But the signature at the bottom was George Washington. It was kind of sloped off the paper, and because it wouldn't fit in the frame, somebody took scissors and cut the name in half. And then they didn't even save the other half of the paper. So it was George, George, and you could start to see
Right.
the W, and the rest was gone. So whoever framed it destroyed the letter.
Couldn't they have just folded it under if they wanted to fit it in the frame?
Wouldn't you think? But evidently, nope, they wanted to fit it in the frame, so they cut it and fit it in the
So
frame.
what happened to that? What happened to that piece?
Well, they took it back with them. I mean, it's
Okay.
not something they just wanted a value on it. We told
Right.
them in the condition that it was in,
Yeah.
it was minimal because there's no way to authenticate what it was.
And some of the older pieces you have, what are the dates of those? How
Well,
far back?
I've got stuff back into the late 1700s. So I've got some stuff that's Revolutionary War. Not much, pieces here and there, not a lot. But of course, as you get closer to today, it's easier to
Right.
find stuff. So
Yeah,
and I've got some Civil
yeah.
War stuff, and
Yeah, books are the same way. We can find books still in the 1800s, but 1700s and before, early 1700s is very hard to find, and progressively getting harder.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you want good subject matter, that's the other thing.
Right.
You can find stuff that somebody hand wrote a note, I owe you, $5, and they signed it and dated it 1823 or whatever, but it's just a little handwritten note, I owe you, that doesn't
Right.
really mean anything. But that you can find that kind of stuff, but to find something that has significant importance, like, well, I paid $5 for this slave named so and so, that
Right.
would be a whole different thing. And you just don't find those things anymore.
What about something like business ledgers? If someone owned a general store, you know, and the ledgers are full, is there still a market for that?
Here's you're going to kill me when I tell you. There's there's a scrapbooking group of people who buy ledgers and then they don't take them apart and they don't
Oh,
destroy them, but they glue their stuff right on top of what's in the ledger. And it's a big deal today. They use old ledgers and it's a big deal.
something just doesn't seem right about that, Carol.
It's
Something
kind of like cutting a book up, isn't it?
they used to do that in the 1980s, though. They would
Yeah.
they would take the books and cut out the plates and frame the
Mm.
plates and sell the plates. And I know that there's a big, not a large, but there's people who will buy old magazines and delicately tear out the advertisements and frame those and sell those advertisements. And it, I
Yeah.
understand why they do it, but it doesn't make sense as a whole to me
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah. So tell me, I know you're heading to Buffalo next week. Tell me about what that show is going to be looking like.
Well, it's a first time show for this promoter. Um, Eve and I can't remember her husband's name. Last name is Lemon.
Okay.
And this first time in Buffalo that they're doing a show. They do one in New York and one in Philadelphia, I think. So and it's the first time I've actually traveled out of town to do a book fair. So it'll be an interesting experiment. I'm looking forward to it. I've put together some of my better inventory, and then I put together some lower end stuff because I want to be able to satisfy all price ranges. So I've got, postcards from New York State and some from Canada, and I've got advertising trade cards. I'm bringing my husband's um, French nude collection of women, and I've priced those cards to sell, and posters and some artwork and Bibles and another
How do
children's
you
book.
travel? How do you travel with this? Do you ship it ahead of time? What are the logistics of that?
Well, I shipped out 120 pounds of ephemera,
How many boxes was that?
four,
Okay,
two
so
banker's
13. Okay,
boxes, a large box, and then a kind of a print size or frame
okay.
size box. $350 to ship it. So, but
Can
it'll,
you ship that medium mail, or do you do priority because of the value?
well, I sent it regular ground,
Okay.
ground advantage. So it's got a tracking number.
Mhm.
And you can't do media mail because it has to be a book in
Right.
order to be media mail. A paper ephemera isn't considered media mail.
It used
At
to
one
be,
time, you could
Carol.
get
It
away
used
with it,
to be. I know. They
not
changed.
anymore. So it just went regular
Right.
ground advantage, but it
So,
should be
so,
there on
yeah.
Monday.
So you ship four boxes out there, you meet with those four boxes, and then at the show, the tables and everything else is supplied for you?
Yeah. So, I'll have to come up with a few display things to make
Right.
it so that it has some dimension and height. But I've got some ideas about what I can buy that's inexpensive, and then I just won't come home with that stuff.
Right. You're
It'll
gonna
be just
sell that too.
it'll be.
You're gonna sell
I'll
the
give
mini
it.
shelves.
I'll give it to somebody who will use it that's local.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm gonna ask you to go get that spider web portrait if you don't mind.
All right,
Because
I'll be
if
right
I
back.
don't, Carol, if I don't ask you, in the comments, they're gonna get mad at me. Why didn't you show it? So
I'll go get it.
we're
Just
gonna get it. Okay.
all right.
All
That
right.
didn't take too long. So it's just in a little black, so
Okay.
you can see it's not
Yep.
very big.
Yep. Got a view of it. Yep.
And then inside, it doesn't look like much. It's got the guy's
Okay. Yeah, we're
name,
good. Yeah.
artist name,
Paintings
and
on
then
cobweb. Yep.
and in this little corner,
Uh-huh.
when you open it, there's the
Oh my
spider and
goodness. Yeah.
the cobweb, and then over on this side is the actual painting.
Okay.
Let me open up the little flaps of paper that cover
Somewhere EB White is very sad right now.
it. Oops.
Hold it
Well,
up
you
a
can
little
kind
bit,
of see.
Carol. Unbelievable. I am so glad I had you get this.
Isn't
And
that
that is
beautiful?
done on a spider web,
On a cobweb,
on a
yes.
cobweb.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Okay. Close it up,
I
Carol, because I'm afraid a breeze is going to blow that away. Oh my, that is. And are you bringing that? Are you going to bring that, or is that not for sale yet?
oh no, I'm taking it.
Okay. What? I have to ask. What is the price of a portrait on a cobweb?
Well, this one's got some cobweb damage. I'm
Hmm.
thinking somewhere maybe between 700 and 900, but
Okay.
I'm sure there's some that are in the thousands.
Unbelievable.
But
Unbelievable.
it's just incredible. I mean, you don't see it, you don't hear about it.
I'm so glad I had you show that. That is exciting. I didn't expect it to be as detailed as you just showed it to me. I
Yeah,
didn't not expect that.
yeah.
What do they paint it with?
Well, whatever medium they used for painting back then. I
Ooh,
mean, don't I'm sure it's probably an oil-based paint of some sort.
that is incredible. Wow. Well, I'm going to ask you one last question. It's the question I ask everybody at the end of our interviews. The show is called Destination Unknown. You are again number 18. So you're going to be sending me to episode number 19. Where, Carol, where am I going? Where are you taking me?
I'm gonna I'm gonna recommend that
Okay.
you get a hold of a bookseller in Denver. His name is Dan Danbaum,
Okay.
and he has a shop called The Printed Page,
Beautiful.
and it's been around a long time. He's a member of the ABAA, and he is just the nicest guy you've ever seen. And he's written a book about it's called "I Met Another Dead Guy Today," and he builds these stories about people's lives based off of their libraries. He's just really a fascinating guy, and that's who I'm going to recommend.
Beautiful.
Um,
Thank you very much. If you don't mind reaching out to him and let him know, I'm going to be contacting him. I
mhm.
thank you for your Saturday afternoon today. I
Oh,
know
sure.
I know we had to try to get a good time in for both of us. We're both
Yeah.
busy. And I hope you have a great show in Buffalo, and I look forward to meeting back with you in the future.
And come out to Colorado,
I
everybody.
have
Just
to. I
come
got to
on
get in
out.
that garage, Carol. I got to get in the garage. I got to get out there.
There you go. Just give me a call. You're welcome
I will.
anytime.
Thank you very much, Carol.
All right. Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.